I am Winnie, 58 years old, a former English teacher who now owns a small bookstore. I never imagined I would be standing at my son Jackson's wedding uninvited, watching the shocked faces of guests who thought I was dead. For years he had been telling everyone I was gone, while building his perfect life on that lie. The moment I walked in with my lawyer friend beside me, I felt both heartbroken and strangely powerful. If you are watching this right now, let me know where you are from in the comments. Do not forget to like and subscribe as I reveal how I uncovered the most painful betrayal a mother could face. Life as a single mother was never easy, but Jackson was my world. His father walked out when our boy was only 3, leaving me to raise our son alone in our small Massachusetts town just outside Boston. I still remember the night Mark left. Jackson was asleep upstairs clutching his favorite dinosaur toy, while downstairs his father packed a single suitcase claiming he needed to find himself. He never really looked for us again. I threw myself into being both mother and father. My career as an English teacher at Lincoln High School spanned 25 years. The pay was modest, but the job allowed me to be home when Jackson got off the school bus. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house with faded blue shutters. It was not much, but I made sure it was always warm and filled with books. There were so many sacrifices those early years. I worked weekends at a local cafe to afford the science camp Jackson wanted to attend. My own dream of opening a bookstore was tucked away in a journal I kept hidden in my bedside drawer. Every extra penny went toward Jackson's college fund. I wore the same winter coat for 12 years and learned to fix everything from leaky faucets to faulty electrical outlets because calling a professional was out of our budget. Jackson was such a bright child. He could read before kindergarten and would entertain my fellow teachers with his vocabulary. By 3rd grade, he was devouring novels meant for middle schoolers. I swelled with pride when his teachers praised his intelligence. But there were signs I chose to ignore. Like how he told his classmates his father was a pilot who flew international routes, explaining away his absence. Or the time I overheard him telling a new friend that we had a swimming pool behind our modest house. Little white lies, I thought. Just a child's imagination. During those early years, we were inseparable. Every night we had our ritual. Jackson would choose a book from our overstuffed shelves, and we would curl up on our worn sofa, diving into worlds of imagination together. We discussed characters as if they were friends, debated plot twists, and dreamed about the places we would visit someday. When Jackson received his acceptance letter to Brown University, I cried tears of joy. All those extra shifts, all those years of budget meals and secondhand clothes had been worth it. My boy was going to have opportunities I never had. The financial aid package was generous, but there were still expenses. I took out a second mortgage on our little house to cover what his scholarships did not. The first signs of trouble appeared during his sophomore year of college. His calls home became less frequent. When he did call, he spoke about his new friends, the children of doctors and business executives. He mentioned weekend trips to New York and Boston outings I knew were beyond his budget. When I asked how he could afford such excursions, he was vague, mentioning new friends who invited him along. By his senior year, Jackson had joined a prestigious fraternity and was interning at a corporate law firm in Providence. The blue-collar son of a teacher was reinventing himself. When I drove 5 hours to attend his graduation, he barely had time for me. He introduced me quickly to a few friends before rushing off to a celebration with his girlfriend's family. I sat alone at the ceremony, bursting with pride, but feeling strangely invisible. After graduation, Jackson moved to Chicago for a position at Crawford & Bennett, a law firm known for its corporate clients and cutthroat culture. Our weekly phone calls dwindled to monthly, then to major holidays only. When we did speak, he would share surface details about cases he was working on, using legal jargon I did not quite understand. He never asked about my life, my students, or our small town. I told myself this was normal. Children grow up and build their own lives. I had done my job. He was successful and independent. But at night, looking at his childhood photos, I wondered if success meant forgetting where you came from. I wondered if I had somehow failed to teach him that value. Jackson was becoming someone I did not recognize, and I was becoming someone he did not want to acknowledge. I discovered Jackson was engaged through a Facebook post. Not a phone call or even a text message. Just a perfectly staged photo of him kneeling before a beautiful woman named Audrey on the Chicago riverfront, the city lights twinkling behind them. The caption announced their engagement with a string of hashtags. 247 people had congratulated them before I even saw the post. I was comment number 248. For days I waited for him to call with the news. When my phone finally rang almost a week later, Jackson sounded hurried. "Sorry I did not tell you first, Mom. Everything happened so quickly, and Audrey wanted to share the news right away." He explained, traffic noise nearly drowning out his voice. He was calling during his commute, I realized. Not even setting aside dedicated time to share his engagement with me. I swallowed my hurt. "Tell me about Audrey. I want to know everything about the woman who captured my son's heart." "She is a corporate attorney. We met at a firm function. Her father is George Hamilton of Hamilton and Associates. They are pretty well known in Chicago legal circles," he replied, his voice taking on that polished tone he had developed since moving to the city. "That is wonderful, honey. When can I meet her?" A pause. "We are pretty busy with work right now, maybe in a few months." It was 9 months before I finally met Audrey and her parents. Jackson arranged a dinner at Everest, one of Chicago's most expensive restaurants. I spent a month's worth of bookstore profits on a new dress and took the train to the city, staying at a budget hotel 20 blocks from Jackson's luxury high-rise apartment, which I had yet to see in person. Audrey was striking with honey blonde hair and the confident posture of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. Her parents, George and Vivian Hamilton, greeted me with practiced politeness. George had silver hair and a firm handshake that matched his reputation as one of Chicago's most formidable attorneys. Vivian wore a tennis bracelet that probably cost more than my house. Throughout dinner, I tried to connect with my future daughter-in-law, asking about her interests and family traditions. Her responses were pleasant but brief. The conversation flowed more easily when they discussed law firms, mutual acquaintances, and their upcoming trip to the Hamptons. While waiting for dessert, I excused myself to the restroom. As I returned, I overheard Jackson speaking to Audrey's parents at our table. "She is just a small-town teacher," he was saying, his voice lowered. "She did her best, but she does not really understand this world." My steps faltered. George Hamilton nodded sympathetically. "We all come from somewhere, son. What matters is where you are going." I stood frozen behind a decorative column, my heart splintering. My son was apologizing for me, for the life I had given him, for the sacrifices that had put him through college and launched his career. I returned to the table with a fixed smile, pretending I had heard nothing. But something fundamental had shifted. The gulf between us, once a crack, was now a chasm. Over the following months, I noticed how Jackson had begun rewriting his background. On a visit to his apartment, I saw framed photos of him sailing, a hobby we could never have afforded. When Audrey mentioned his childhood piano lessons, I was confused as we had never owned a piano. During a brunch with their friends, he spoke of family skiing vacations that had never occurred. Each fabrication was a small cut. My son was not just moving forward, he was erasing our shared past. That winter, I became ill with pneumonia that developed into sepsis. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital, including 5 days in intensive care. Jackson visited once for less than an hour, explaining he was in the middle of an important case. He sent flowers and called occasionally, asking perfunctory questions about my recovery, before inevitably mentioning a work obligation that required his attention. My students and fellow teachers brought meals, drove me to follow-up appointments, and took turns staying overnight during my first week home. My son sent a check to cover some medical expenses with a note that read, "Get better soon. Sorry I cannot be there. Things are crazy here." By spring, I had recovered enough to make a long-held dream come true. I retired from teaching after 25 years and used my modest savings to open a small bookstore called Turning Pages in our town's struggling Main Street district. It was nothing grand, just a cozy space with carefully curated selections and comfortable chairs where customers could get lost in a story. I sent Jackson photos of the grand opening. 37 people from town showed up with homemade food and small gifts. Former students volunteered to help shelve books and set up the computer system. It was one of the proudest days of my life. Jackson texted back, "Looks nice, busy with depositions this week. We'll call soon." He did not call for 6 weeks. Our communication continued to dwindle. Major holidays merited a brief call. Birthdays warranted a gift card sent by his assistant. When I mentioned visiting Chicago again, there was always some reason why the timing was not right. One evening while browsing Facebook, I discovered Jackson had purchased a house in an exclusive Chicago suburb. Not from his announcement, but from a post by Audrey tagging them at their new home sweet home. It was a stately colonial with perfect landscaping and a 3-car garage. In the photo, they stood smiling on a sweeping front porch, champagne glasses raised in celebration. My son had taken this massive life step without even mentioning it to me. I stared at the image for a long time at the manicured lawn and brick facade, wondering if there would be any place for me in this new chapter of his life. The evidence suggested not. As I closed my laptop that night, I realized with startling clarity that Jackson was not just establishing his independence. He was systematically cutting me out, minimizing my existence until I would eventually disappear altogether. I had no idea how prophetic that fear would prove to be. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning as I was unpacking a shipment of new releases for the bookstore. The sender's name made me smile. Emma Porter had been one of my favorite students from my final years of teaching. She had gone on to study journalism at Northwestern and occasionally sent updates about her burgeoning career. But the subject line stopped me cold. "Condolences and a strange coincidence." I opened the message with a growing sense of unease. "Dear Ms. Winters, I hope this email finds you well. I am writing because of a strange encounter that has left me confused. Last week I was covering a charity gala in Chicago for young professionals in law. I met your son Jackson there, and when I excitedly mentioned having been your student, he became very quiet. He then told me you had passed away from cancer several years ago. He spoke movingly about how your memory inspires him. Imagine my shock when I saw your bookstore newsletter in my inbox this morning. Unless this is some kind of supernatural email service, you are very much alive. I am not sure what to make of this situation, but I thought you should know. Perhaps there was some misunderstanding on my part. With respect and confusion, Emma." I read the email 3 times, certain I had misunderstood something. My hands trembled as I set my coffee mug down before I could drop it. This had to be a mistake. My son might have been distant, might have been embarrassed by his humble beginnings, but surely he would not have told people I was dead. I called Emma immediately. "There was no misunderstanding," she confirmed, her voice gentle. "He specifically talked about losing you to cancer 4 years ago. He even mentioned a foundation he contributes to in your memory. Ms. Winters, he got emotional discussing it. I would not have mistaken something like that." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence among my beloved books. Then, with shaking hands, I opened my laptop and began to search. What I found shattered my world. A simple search of Jackson's name plus mother revealed dozens of references across various platforms. A profile in a legal magazine mentioned how he had overcome personal tragedy, losing his mother to cancer while in law school. His bio on the firm website noted his involvement with the Cancer Support Network in memory of his mother. There was even a charity run he had participated in wearing a shirt with "For Mom" printed on the back. I found photos of him at a fundraising gala for cancer research where apparently he had given a speech about the impact of losing a parent. The caption quoted him saying the experience had shaped his commitment to giving back. My son had killed me off for his convenience, crafting a sympathetic backstory that served his professional image better than having a living, breathing mother who was just a retired teacher from a small town. With growing horror, I discovered an alumni feature from Brown, where Jackson discussed how the loss of his mother had motivated him to excel. "She sacrificed everything for my education," he was quoted saying. "After she passed, I promised myself her sacrifices would not be in vain." At least that part was true. I had sacrificed everything. I tried calling Jackson immediately. The call went to voicemail. I texted him asking to speak urgently. Hours passed with no response. Finally, late that evening, he called back. "Mom, what is so urgent?" He sounded irritated, as if my emergency was an inconvenience. Jackson, I just received a very disturbing email. I began struggling to keep my voice steady. A former student of mine met you at an event in Chicago. She said you told her I died of cancer years ago. A long pause. That is ridiculous, he finally said with a forced laugh. She must have misunderstood. She did not misunderstand Jackson. I searched online. There are dozens of references to your deceased mother. You have been telling people I am dead for years. Another pause, longer this time. It is complicated, Mom. His voice had changed, become defensive. Sometimes people make assumptions, and it is easier to just go along with it. Assumptions about whether your mother is alive or dead. My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. You do not understand the pressure I am under, the image I need to maintain, he said. The firm Audrey's family, they have certain expectations. And a living mother does not meet those expectations. I was shaking now with anger or hurt, I could not tell. That is not what I meant. He backpedaled. Look, it was a misunderstanding that got out of hand. I will fix it. How exactly do you fix telling the world your mother is dead when she is not? Mom, I have to go. I have an early meeting tomorrow. We will talk about this later. Okay. It is not as bad as you are making it out to be. And then he hung up. He hung up on me after I had discovered he had fictionally buried me. My heartbreak curdled into anger as the days passed with no further contact from Jackson. The more I searched, the more evidence I found of his elaborate lie. It was not a misunderstanding or something that got out of hand. It was a deliberate, sustained deception that he had maintained for years. In my desperation to understand the extent of his betrayal, I did something I never thought I would do. I hired a private investigator, a retired police officer named Frank, who was a regular at my bookstore. I asked him to document every instance he could find of Jackson referencing my death, and to determine how far the deception went. 2 weeks later, Frank delivered a thick folder of printouts, screenshots, and transcripts. Jackson had been consistent and thorough in his fictional narrative about his deceased mother. He had even apparently established a small memorial scholarship at his former high school, though investigation revealed the money had never actually been paid. I am sorry, Winnie, Frank said, as I paged through the evidence of my son's betrayal. I have seen a lot in my years as a detective, but I have never seen anything quite like this. Neither had I. And as I sat surrounded by proof of my son's elaborate lies, I realized that the child I had raised, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, was gone as surely as if he had actually died. In his place was a stranger who found it easier to kill me off than to incorporate me into his carefully constructed new life. That night I cried until there were no tears left. Then I began to plan. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Lisa, a longtime customer and friend, came into the bookstore bursting with excitement that quickly turned to confusion. Winnie, I was just talking to Marion, whose nephew works with your son in Chicago. She mentioned Jackson is getting married next month. Have you been keeping secrets from us? What are you wearing to the wedding? Will you be bringing a date? The rapid-fire questions hit me like physical blows. My son was getting married. Next month. And I was hearing about it from a random connection in my small town. Oh, I stammered, attempting to maintain my composure. The date must have been moved up. We have not finalized all the details yet. Lisa's excitement faded to concern as she noticed my expression. Are you okay, Winnie? You look like you have seen a ghost. If only she knew how appropriate that description was. After she left, I immediately checked Jackson and Audrey's social media accounts. There it was, an announcement post from 3 months ago that had somehow not appeared in my feed. They had set a date for their wedding, October 15th, at the Drake Hotel, one of Chicago's most historic and expensive venues. Days passed, then weeks. No invitation arrived. I called Jackson repeatedly, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I emailed him asking directly about the wedding, only to receive a brief reply. Things are very hectic right now with wedding planning and a big case. We'll call when things settle down. By 2 weeks before the wedding, with still no invitation, I knew with certainty that my son had no intention of including me in his special day. The mother who had raised him, who had worked 2 jobs to put him through college, who had sacrificed her own dreams for his, was not welcome at his wedding, likely because he could hardly invite a woman he had told everyone was dead. Through a mutual acquaintance, I found the wedding website. It was password protected, but the acquaintance, unaware of our estrangement, happily shared the access code. The site was a showcase of luxury, with engagement photos taken in exotic locations, details of the 7-course dinner to be served, and information about the string quartet and jazz band hired for the reception. And then I found it. Under a tab labeled "In Loving Memory," there was a section dedicated to honoring those who cannot be with us on our special day. And there I was, a photo of me from Jackson's high school graduation with the caption, "Winnie Winters, Jackson's beloved mother, who lost her battle with cancer in 2020. Her spirit will be with us on this joyous day." I sat at my computer, staring at my own memorial, feeling as though I had fallen through the looking glass into some twisted alternative reality. My son had not only erased me from his present life, he had erased me from existence itself. Further exploration of the website revealed more about the life Jackson had constructed. His future father-in-law, George Hamilton, was planning to bring Jackson in as a named partner in his prestigious firm following the wedding. The event was clearly as much a business merger as a romantic union, with the guest list reading like a who's who of Chicago's legal and business elite. I was devastated, but beneath the pain, something else was building. A slow, burning anger, a resolve. I called my oldest friend, Sarah Levinson. We had been friends since our first year teaching together 30 years ago. She had been maid of honor at my wedding, had held my hand through my divorce, and had been a second mother to Jackson throughout his childhood. She was also conveniently a family lawyer, with a reputation for being a formidable opponent in court. "This is beyond emotional cruelty, Winnie," Sarah said after I explained everything. "There could be legal implications here. Using your name and likeness in false statements, potentially collecting charitable donations based on a fabricated death. Not to mention the possible professional ethics violations for an attorney knowingly spreading such significant falsehoods." "What should I do?" I asked, feeling simultaneously powerless and determined. "Document everything," Sarah advised. "Every instance where he has claimed you are deceased. Then I think you need to confront this situation head-on with witnesses present." "You mean crash the wedding?" I said slowly. "I mean make your existence known in a way that cannot be denied or explained away," Sarah corrected. "And I will be right there with you both as your friend and as legal counsel." Over the next week we prepared. Sarah helped me compile all the evidence into a cohesive portfolio. We discussed every possible scenario and reaction. We prepared statements that were firm but not vindictive, and we arranged our travel to Chicago. As the day approached, I vacillated between determination and doubt. Was I doing the right thing? Would this irreparably damage any chance of reconciliation with my son? But then I would remember the memorial page on his wedding website, the interviews where he spoke movingly of his loss, the years of being systematically erased, and my resolve would strengthen. My son had decided I was dead to him. It was time he faced the ghost. The morning of October 15th dawned clear and crisp in Chicago. From my hotel room window I could see Lake Michigan stretching like a blue promise toward the horizon. I had barely slept my mind cycling through what lay ahead, but as I prepared for the day, I felt strangely calm. I chose my outfit carefully, a tailored navy blue suit that I had purchased specifically for this occasion, elegant without being flashy. I wanted to look dignified, professional, a woman of substance, not the embarrassing small-town mother Jackson had been so eager to erase. Sarah arrived at my hotel room at 11, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that underscored her role as legal counsel as much as friend. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her eyes searching mine for any sign of hesitation. "I have been ready since the day I found out my son has been telling people I am dead for years," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "This is not about revenge. It is about truth. Some truths need to be spoken aloud." The Drake Hotel stood majestic against the Chicago skyline, its history and elegance a perfect backdrop for the sophisticated wedding my son had planned. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock, with a reception to follow in the grand ballroom. We arrived at 3:30, timing our appearance for the middle of the reception when all guests would be present. The hotel lobby was buzzing with activity, some of it clearly related to the Winters Hamilton wedding taking place upstairs. Well-dressed guests hurried through, some heading to the ballroom, others stepping out for brief breaks. Sarah and I approached the elevator that would take us to the reception. "Excuse me, ladies, do you have an invitation?" A young man with an earpiece, clearly part of the wedding coordination team, stepped in front of us. "No," I said simply. "But I am the mother of the groom." The young man checked his tablet. "I am sorry, there must be some mistake. The mother of the groom is deceased." Sarah stepped forward, her lawyer persona fully engaged. "That is an interesting statement, considering she is standing right in front of you. Perhaps you would like to see her identification." I produced my driver's license, holding it beside my face. "As you can see, I am very much alive." Confusion washed over the young man's face. "I do not understand. Mr. Winters specifically included a memorial tribute to his late mother in the program." "That is precisely why we are here," Sarah said, her voice firm but not unkind, "to correct that misunderstanding." The coordinator stepped aside to make a phone call, clearly unsure how to handle this unprecedented situation. We took advantage of his distraction to slip into an open elevator and press the button for the ballroom floor. As we ascended, Sarah squeezed my hand. "Remember, no matter what happens, you have done nothing wrong. You are simply existing, which is your right." The elevator doors opened to reveal an elegantly decorated foyer leading to the grand ballroom. The sounds of celebration spilled out, clinking glasses, orchestra music, laughter. We followed the sounds, pausing at the ballroom entrance. Through the open doorway, I could see hundreds of guests seated at tables adorned with elaborate floral centerpieces. A crystal chandelier cast a warm glow over the scene, and there at the head table sat Jackson and Audrey. He in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, she in a stunning white gown that probably cost more than my bookstore made in 3 months. As we watched, Jackson stood and tapped his glass for attention. The room gradually quieted as he began to speak. "Thank you all for sharing this special day with Audrey and me," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. "As many of you know, this day is bittersweet for me, as I cannot help but think of my mother, who I lost to cancer 5 years ago." My breath caught in my throat. Her strength during her illness taught me the meaning of courage. Jackson continued, his voice taking on a rehearsed emotional quality. "And though she cannot be here physically, I feel her presence guiding me through every important moment of my life." The room was silent now, guests captivated by this touching tribute. Some were dabbing at their eyes. Audrey gazed up at him adoringly, clearly moved by her new husband's emotional vulnerability. "She sacrificed everything to give me opportunities she never had," Jackson went on. "And I know she would be proud to see the man I have become, the life Audrey and I will build together." That was the moment I chose to enter, Sarah a step behind me. My heels clicked on the marble floor, the sound echoing in the hushed room. Heads began to turn. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. And then, as recognition dawned on face after face, the murmur grew to a buzz of disbelief. Jackson was still speaking, unaware of the disturbance at the back of the room. "To honor her memory, Audrey and I will be making a donation to cancer research in her name." "That is very generous of you, Jackson," I said, my voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. "But perhaps you could donate to a literacy program instead. I have always been more passionate about that cause. As you well know, I never had cancer." Jackson froze mid-speech, his champagne glass suspended in the air. The color drained from his face as he stared at me, standing very much alive at the back of his wedding reception. For a moment, time seemed suspended, the entire room holding its breath. Then chaos erupted. Audrey stood abruptly, looking from Jackson to me and back again, confusion and shock battling on her face. Guests began whispering urgently to each other. Some pulled out phones either to take photos or to search for an explanation. Jackson remained frozen, his expression one of absolute horror. With measured steps, I walked toward the head table, Sarah beside me. The crowd parted automatically, creating a path through the center of the ballroom. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, hear the crescendo of confused murmurs, but I kept my focus on my son. When I reached the head table, I stopped meeting Jackson's stunned gaze directly. "Hello, son," I said, my voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "Congratulations on your wedding day." Jackson finally found his voice, though it emerged strangled and high. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I came to celebrate my only child's wedding," I replied, though I seemed to have misplaced my invitation. Audrey stood beside Jackson, her beautiful features contorted in confusion. "Jackson, what is happening? You told me your mother died while you were in law school." "He told everyone that," I said gently. "But as you can see, the reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated." George Hamilton. Audrey's father approached the table, his expression thunderous. "What is the meaning of this, Jackson?" Jackson looked desperately around the room like a cornered animal seeking escape. "I can explain," he began, though his face suggested he had no idea how to explain away this situation. "Mrs. Winters has documentation if anyone requires proof of her identity," Sarah interjected smoothly, her lawyer's training evident in her calm demeanor. "That will not be necessary," George Hamilton said, his eyes never leaving Jackson's face. "I recognize Winnie from our dinner last year. What I do not recognize is the man who would fabricate his own mother's death." He turned to me, his expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Winters, I had no idea." "Few did," I acknowledged. That was apparently the point. Jackson finally seemed to gather himself. "Mom, this is not the time or place," he hissed. "You are embarrassing yourself and ruining our wedding." Sarah stepped forward. "Actually, Jackson, you have created this situation yourself. Your mother has every right to correct the record about her own existence." "She is unwell," Jackson said loudly, pivoting to a new strategy. "She has been suffering from delusions. This is part of her pattern of disturbing behavior." I had anticipated this defense. Calmly, I opened the portfolio Sarah and I had prepared. "I have here documentation of 17 separate instances where you publicly claimed I was deceased dating back 5 years. I have statements from my doctor confirming my excellent mental health. And I have evidence of charitable donations you solicited in memory of my supposed death. Would you like me to share these with your guests, with your new in-laws, with representatives of the Bar Association, who I believe take a dim view of attorneys who systematically misrepresent facts?" Jackson's face contorted with a mixture of rage and fear. Beside him, Audrey slowly removed her hand from his arm, staring at him as if seeing him for the first time. "You told me she abused you," Audrey said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You said that is why you never wanted to discuss her even after she died." I felt as if I had been physically struck. "Abused him." I echoed the portfolio, nearly slipping from my suddenly numb fingers. "I worked 2 jobs to put him through college. I postponed my own dreams so he could pursue his. I did everything for him." Audrey's eyes filled with tears. She looked from Jackson to me, then down at her diamond engagement ring. With deliberate movements, she twisted it off her finger and placed it on the table in front of him. "I do not know who you are," she said, her voice breaking, "but you are not the man I thought I married today." George Hamilton placed a protective arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Winnie, I owe you an apology. Jackson led us to believe." He paused, seemingly unable to continue. "That I was a monster before becoming conveniently deceased," I supplied. "It seems my son has quite the imagination." Around us, the elegant wedding was dissolving into turmoil. Guests were standing, some moving toward the exits, others gathering in small groups to discuss the unfolding drama. The orchestra had stopped playing, the musicians watching the scene with undisguised fascination. Jackson made one last desperate attempt. "You never understood what it takes to succeed in this world," he spat, abandoning pretense. "Your small-town mindset, your modest ambitions. You were holding me back. People like the Hamiltons, my colleagues, they expect a certain background. They wouldn't respect me if they knew where I really came from." The naked truth of his words hung in the air between us. After all these years, all the sacrifices, all the love, this was how my son saw me, as an embarrassment, an obstacle to overcome. Sarah's hand gripped my arm, offering silent support. "I think," I said quietly, "that the only person who is ashamed of your background was you, Jackson. And that is a tragedy, because I have always been immensely proud of you. Until today." I turned to Audrey and her parents. "I am truly sorry for the pain this has caused you. That was never my intention. I simply could not allow the fiction of my death to continue." "You have nothing to apologize for," George Hamilton assured me, his disgust for Jackson evident in his expression. "It is clear who owes apologies here." With as much dignity as I could muster, I turned and walked back through the ballroom. The crowd once again parted, but this time I was aware of expressions of sympathy, shocked whispers, and more than a few glares directed at Jackson. As Sarah and I reached the doorway, I allowed myself one last look back at my son. He stood alone at the head table, his new bride being comforted by her parents across the room, his perfectly orchestrated wedding in shambles around him. For a brief moment our eyes met across the distance, and I saw something flicker in his expression, something that might have been regret. Then I walked out, head held high, into the crisp Chicago afternoon, leaving behind the elaborate fiction my son had constructed, and with it the last illusions I had about who he had become. The aftermath unfolded like a slow-motion collision. Sarah and I had barely returned to our hotel when my phone began buzzing with notifications. Word of what had happened at the Drake Hotel was spreading through Jackson's social and professional circles like wildfire. Several guests from the wedding reached out directly, some offering sympathy, others seeking confirmation of the dramatic scene they had witnessed. One woman introduced herself as Jackson's colleague from the law firm. "I contributed to a memorial scholarship he established in your name," she wrote. "I feel sick knowing it was all a lie." By evening, 3 different former friends of Jackson had contacted me with similar stories of fabrications he had told them, each one more elaborate than the last. One had been told I died saving children from a house fire. Another believed I had succumbed to a rare tropical disease contracted during humanitarian work. It seemed my son had tailored my fictional demise to impress whoever he was speaking with at the time. I sat on the hotel bed scrolling through messages as Sarah ordered room service for us both. "I never imagined it would explode quite like this," I admitted, setting down my phone after it buzzed for the 30th time. "People do not like being lied to," Sarah observed, pouring us each a glass of water. "Especially not about something as significant as a parent's death. Jackson violated a social contract that most people hold sacred." The next morning brought a call from Audrey. Her voice was strained but composed as she asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, and an hour later Sarah and I sat across from her in a quiet cafe near our hotel. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her posture was straight, her hands steady as she stirred her untouched latte. "I owe you an apology," she began without preamble. "I believed terrible things about you based solely on Jackson's word." "You loved and trusted him," I replied. "Most people would have done the same." "That is kind of you to say," she acknowledged, "but I should have questioned the inconsistencies. There were so many times his stories did not quite add up, but I dismissed my doubts because I thought I knew who he was." She looked up at me, her eyes filling with fresh tears. "I was wrong." She explained that the wedding had completely fallen apart after our departure. The Hamiltons had removed their daughter from the reception, immediately publicly announcing that they no longer supported the union. Most guests had departed soon after, leaving Jackson alone among the elaborate decorations and uneaten wedding cake. "My father has already spoken with his attorney about an annulment," Audrey said, twisting the napkin in her hands. "And he has withdrawn the partnership offer." I felt a complicated mix of vindication and sadness. "I never intended to destroy his life," I said quietly. "I just could not continue to be erased from it." "You did not destroy anything," Audrey countered firmly. "Jackson did that himself with his lies. I am just grateful I discovered the truth before we built a life together. She hesitated, then added, He told me you were emotionally abusive, that you belittled his ambitions and tried to hold him back out of jealousy. The pain of hearing this was physical, a tight band around my chest. I devoted my life to supporting his dreams, I whispered. I know that now, Audrey said, reaching across the table to briefly touch my hand. My father has been making inquiries. Everyone from your hometown speaks of you with immense respect. Your former students, your colleagues, they all describe a woman of exceptional kindness and integrity. Later that day, I received an email notification that Jackson's law firm had placed him on immediate administrative leave pending an ethics investigation. A partner at the firm explained that falsifying personal information of this magnitude raised serious questions about professional conduct and character. The story continued to spread. Someone had posted a photo of me at the wedding on social media with a brief explanation of what had transpired. It was being shared in legal circles across Chicago, each share accompanied by expressions of disbelief and condemnation. Through it all, Jackson maintained radio silence with me, though I knew he was attempting damage control elsewhere. Friends forwarded me emails he had sent trying to explain away the situation, claiming I had abandoned him as a child before reappearing at his wedding out of spite, or suggesting I was mentally unstable. Few seemed to be accepting these new fabrications. 2 days after the wedding, as Sarah and I prepared to return home, a final email arrived from Jackson. Unlike his communications with others, this one contained no excuses or alternative narratives. I never meant for this to go so far, he wrote. It started with one lie that seemed easier than explaining my real background to people who would judge me for it. Then I could not take it back without looking like a fraud. I know you will probably never forgive me, and I understand why. But you have ruined everything I worked for. I hope that brings you some satisfaction. Even in apology, he could not resist making himself the victim. I closed the email without responding, too emotionally exhausted to engage with his distorted perspective. As our train pulled away from Chicago the next morning, I gazed out at the receding skyline, thinking about the son I had raised and the stranger he had become. I had come seeking truth and acknowledgement of my existence. I had found those things, but lost the last vestiges of the relationship I had once treasured above all else. What I did not yet know was that amid the wreckage of exposed lies and shattered pretenses, something unexpected was waiting to be born, something that would help me rebuild my sense of self and purpose in ways I could not yet imagine. I returned to my small town and my bookstore with a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The story of what had happened in Chicago had preceded me traveling through the grapevine that connects small communities. Customers would pause when entering the store, their expressions a blend of curiosity and sympathy. Is it true what they are saying about Jackson? Some would ask directly, while others circled the subject inquiring about my nice trip to Chicago with meaningful glances. I decided honesty was the only path forward. Yes, my son told people I was dead. I would acknowledge. And yes, I attended his wedding uninvited to reclaim my existence. The simple truth stated without embellishment or self-pity usually left people uncertain how to respond. In those first weeks back, I moved through my routines mechanically, opening the store each morning, organizing books, chatting with customers, then returning to my empty house each evening. The betrayal sat like a stone in my chest, heavy and cold. At night, I would page through photo albums trying to reconcile the smiling boy in those images with the man who had erased me from his life so completely. Had there been signs I missed? Moments where I could have intervened to set him on a different path? The questions circled endlessly, robbing me of sleep and peace. The first real step toward healing came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after the wedding, I received an email from Jessica, one of Audrey's bridesmaids. She explained that several guests from the wedding had been profoundly affected by what they witnessed and wanted to understand more about my story, not out of gossip, but from a place of genuine concern. "Would you be willing to meet with a small group of us?" she asked. We realize this may seem strange, but many of us feel complicit in Jackson's deception, having believed and even repeated his stories about you. We would like to know the real Winnie Winters. After some consideration, I agreed. The following weekend, 6 people from Jackson's Chicago circle visited my bookstore after closing hours. They brought wine and food, and what began as an awkward gathering gradually transformed into a genuine conversation. They asked about my life, my teaching career, my love of literature. I shared stories of Jackson's childhood, the real version with all its ordinary struggles and joys. "He did not need to invent a dramatic backstory," commented one of Jackson's former fraternity brothers. "The truth about his hardworking single mother was more impressive than any fiction." That evening marked a turning point. As the group prepared to leave, Jessica hugged me impulsively. "Thank you for sharing your story with us," she said. "It helps make sense of things that never quite added up about Jackson." Over the following months, an unexpected support system began to form. Audrey and I maintained contact, our shared experience of Jackson's betrayal, creating an unusual bond. She visited the bookstore several times, and we developed a friendship based on mutual respect and understanding. "The irony," she told me during one visit, "is that if Jackson had simply been honest, I would have admired him more, not less. A self-made man from modest beginnings. That is the American dream. I never cared about his background, only about his character." It was a sentiment echoed by others who reached out. Even George Hamilton, who had initially seemed so intimidating, called to express his regret for how they had treated me at that first dinner. "I judged you before knowing you," he admitted. "That was my failing, not yours." 6 months after the wedding, I made a decision that surprised even me. I joined a support group for parents estranged from their adult children. Twice a month, I sat in a circle with other mothers and fathers whose relationships with their children had fractured often for reasons they still struggled to understand. There I found people who understood the unique grief of having a living child who was, for all practical purposes, lost to you. They did not offer platitudes or easy solutions. They simply provided space to acknowledge the pain without judgment. Through their stories, I began to recognize that while Jackson's particular form of betrayal was unusually dramatic, the underlying dynamics of parental estrangement were not unique to us. Children rewrite their histories for many reasons, distancing themselves from parents as part of establishing their own identities. Jackson had taken this impulse to an extreme, but the root cause, a desire to reinvent himself, was not incomprehensible. This realization did not excuse his actions, but it helped me contextualize them in a way that made the pain more bearable. My bookstore became another source of healing. I expanded our book club program, adding a special group focused on literature that explored themes of identity, forgiveness, and reconciliation. The discussions were often profound, touching on universal experiences of betrayal and healing that helped me process my own situation. Nearly a year after the wedding, I received a thick envelope in the mail with a Chicago postmark, but no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Jackson, 12 pages long. Unlike his previous communication, this one contained no accusations or self-justification. Instead, it offered something I had not expected: a genuine apology. "I have been in therapy," he wrote. "It has taken me months to fully comprehend the magnitude of what I did to you. There is no excuse for it. You gave me everything, and I repaid you with the ultimate rejection. I do not expect forgiveness, but I need you to know that I understand now how deeply I hurt you, and I am truly sorry." He explained that he had left the law firm before they could formally terminate him and had moved to Seattle to start over. He was working for a nonprofit organization that provided legal services to low-income families, the kind of work that would have made you proud of me if I had not destroyed your trust so completely. I read the letter several times, searching for the manipulative undertones I had grown to expect from him. But it seemed, at least on the surface, to reflect a genuine shift in perspective. He made no request for reconciliation, expressed no expectation of response. It was perhaps the first truly unselfish communication I had received from my adult son. After careful consideration, I sent a brief reply. "Thank you for your letter. I am glad to hear you are finding a better path. I need more time, but I appreciate your apology. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was a small opening, an acknowledgement that while the past could not be undone, the future remained unwritten. 2 years after the wedding that wasn't, I hosted a special event at my bookstore. I had written a memoir titled, Erased a Mother's Journey Back to Existence, chronicling my experience of being killed off by my son and my subsequent journey toward healing. The book had attracted attention from a small publisher specializing in family dynamics and personal growth. The store was packed for the launch. Former students, neighbors, book club members, and even a few people from Jackson's former Chicago circle attended. Audrey was there with her new partner, as was Sarah, who had supported me throughout the writing process. As I read selected passages and answered questions, I realized how far I had come from that devastating day at the Drake Hotel. The betrayal would always be part of my story, but it no longer defined me. I had reclaimed not just my existence, but my voice. Jackson was not at the event. Our relationship remained tentative, limited to occasional emails and one brief phone call on Christmas. Whether we would ever fully reconcile remained uncertain, but I had learned that my worth and identity were not contingent on his recognition or acceptance. That night, after the last guest had left, I sat alone in my bookstore, surrounded by shelves of stories, each one a testament to the complexity of human experience. I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment, the painful discoveries and unexpected connections, the loss, and the eventual rebirth. I had gone to Chicago seeking acknowledgement of my existence. I had found something more valuable, the recognition that my existence needed no external validation. It was, and always had been, entirely my own. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy me had instead forced me to rebuild myself stronger and more authentically than before. In erasing me, my son had inadvertently compelled me to define myself more clearly than I ever had. It was not the path I would have chosen, but it had led me to a place of unexpected peace. Life rarely gives us the endings we expect. Sometimes it gives us something better, not an ending at all, but a new beginning. If you have ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal, I would love to hear your story in the comments. How did you find your way forward? Did you choose to forgive to move on, or some combination of both? Remember to like and subscribe if this story touched you, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded that no one can erase your existence unless you allow it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the truest form of healing comes from reclaiming your own narrative.